After serving as a senior producer with MacNeil Lehrer, Joe Franklin went on to make a trilogy of documentary films about the Middle East. Throughout Desert Storm and the Persian Gulf War, State and Defense Department officials used Franklin's films to train their personnel. She was also asked to serve as a consultant to Special Operations Forces. She has mixed her experiences in the Persian Gulf War with fiction to create her new novel, The Wing of the Falcon. And I'm pleased to have an old friend from Washington here at the time of her first novel. Welcome.
Thanks, Charlie. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Why a novel now after doing controversial and first-rate documentaries and being known for someone who'd spent time in the whole reality television and in nonfiction journalism?
Well, I actually thought, given all of the years that I had been doing, quote, nonfiction out of the area, documentaries and news and reports and everything, that I actually could tell a far larger truth using fiction.
Yeah. What truth do you want to tell?
Well, there's certain realities that exist now in the Middle East, which I think is one of the focal points of the world and will remain so for the next decade. It's going to be tumultuous, it's going to be fascinating, and there are going to be elements that they're wrestling with that are, I think, still not terribly well understood in the West. I think some of them are difficult to comprehend. And basically, The Wing of the Falcon, well, the reviews say to some it reminds them of Herman Wouk's The Winds of War, to others a Tom Clancy thriller. But what it really is to me is a historical novel that's set in the world in the Persian Gulf, that brings you inside that part of the world, which I actually found increasingly more fascinating and different the more I got to know it, to understand the characters and the people that are going to come forward to make up the new Middle East of today.
But back to your point in terms of the message, you want the truth. What's the bigger truth that you want people to grasp coming out of this?
That there's a new Middle East emerging, and that the fabric and the sociology of the Persian Gulf is one that they're going to have to understand far more clearly than they do what these people are wrestling with, so that they understand the issues and how they're going to move ahead. It seems to us, I think, in the West frequently, one step forward, one step back, one step. But I think when you understand the realities of their world a little bit better, it makes more sense of it.
Take us inside what you think is happening within the Palestinian community as they react to gaining control of more territory on the West Bank, as they react to a post-Rabin world.
Well, I think it's a stunning development, frankly, to look at the news and to see at Rabin's funeral these leaders who have been arch enemies for all of these years standing together crying at this man's funeral. We have seen a page of history turn. There's no going back. I think that there may be hesitations, and I think the next juncture in the Middle East is going to be a tough decade to actually move that peace process totally to conclusion. It's going to require knowledge. It's going to require patience, but it will go forward. There's no going back. There's nothing to go back to. It's in everybody's interest to go forward. And I think that emerging, though, from these years of being embattled is a difficult one. It's essentially coming from a siege mentality on the part of the Palestinians to all of a sudden now functioning as accepted players in the world politics stage. And that's a transition. That's a definite transition. It goes from being warrior soldier to mayor.
You know, I wonder, when you think about the Middle East, and you made a film about the Intifada, whether, if you look at the recent history of Israel and its relationship with its neighbors and its potential neighbors, that two extraordinary influential events in terms of the realization that things had to change were, one, the invasion of Lebanon, and two, the Intifada. That somehow coming out of that for many Israelis was, we've got to figure out a better way to do this than the way we are. And as Rabin said to me on this program, you know, we're not we're not cut out to be occupiers.
Well, you know, Rabin said that, Abba Eban the other week in a speech in Los Angeles said, you know, it simply is impractical on top of it. I mean, you can't have this number of people trying to suppress that number of people and expect the result to be any good for anybody. That the demographics were all wrong. The time had come to lay the sword to rest, to come to a peace. And I think that most of the world is now comfortable with that, and it'll move ahead. But it's absolutely fascinating to watch this level of conflict move on. And I think the other thing that clearly happened, it's a new playing field in the Middle East now. It's essentially the Middle East in the age of a single superpower, which changes the whole dynamics. There's not the polarity because there's no one else to turn to for the funding and the backing to polarize off of the West. So it's essentially going to be moving forward in the direction of the West. And the war in the Persian Gulf very clearly showed that the old alliances that were contingent upon the polarity of the Soviet Union versus the U.S. were gone. We left the war in the Persian Gulf. The one clear outcome very surely was a new alignment of the powers. You take that and you put that together with the Israeli-Palestinian peace accord, it's simply a totally new ballgame. And what's going to emerge, you know, not tomorrow, not next week, but it's on its way, it's step by step, and that's the very fabric and the heart of this book, is a new Middle East that's going to have a new identity, that's peopled by characters that we are going to have to let go of our old stereotypes, our old caricatures. I think one of the things that came out of Rabin's assassination was the fact that, an interesting point that Shin Bet made, well, we spent so much time learning about the Palestinian extremists, we haven't spent enough time obviously learning about the Israeli extremists. They're extremists on both sides. There's all of the old image and the stereotypes, you know, we have to let them go. There's new characters emerging, and there'll be a new identity of the Middle East than we've ever seen before, which is what the book The Wing of the Falcon's all about.
Looking at the Palestinian extremists, though, and looking at the role of radical fundamentalism, is it a potent force within the Palestinian community?
Oh, surely. To an extent, it surely is. I think it can ultimately be overcome. I think the peace process will move ahead. But I think at the heart of that is something that's a far larger dynamic that's a key part of the book, The Wing of the Falcon. At the heart of that is that we've let go this old Soviet conflict. That used to be what we were concerned about. That was where our major worries lay. I think that what has emerged is essentially, we see it as Islamic fundamentalism. There's actually, I think, other shades and nuances to it. But I think that the polarity that we're going to have to wrestle with now over the next few decades is the Eastern-Western philosophy one. In other words, if you strip Islamic fundamentalists down, you know, I remember when Khomeini took over, I was inside Iran during the revolutions. I remember the whole genesis of it. What they were saying was very simply, in some ways, we will not become westernized totally. We will move ahead in the world. We will work with you. We will set up systems of cooperation, but we are not going to become you. And I think that it's understanding that they want to hang on to that identity.
Are these the same mullahs who saw the United States as a great Satan?
You know, at the heart of it, but I mean, there's all sorts of different levels. It's a continuum between the mullahs in Iran to the fundamentalists and the Palestinians, but at the heart of it is a very key underlying philosophical statement, which says we do not see the West as necessarily one great good to emulate. You have problems too.
They also, I mean, we have constantly members of the Muslim community from various countries coming here saying, be careful and not and don't think all of us here as radical fundamentalists in terms of some, you know, bent on exporting some kind of revolution or some kind of theocracy. You know, what we are here are people of varying political interest and varying nationalism with one religion,
who maybe want to live a life in a certain way that's somewhat different from ours. And, you know, my basic feeling in life is I really am not threatened by diversity. I relish it. I think it adds richness to the world fabric.
I'm out of time. I thank you. The Wing of the Falcon.
Nice to see you.